Welcome to the American Magazine Conclave podcast, now known as the Pope Leo XIV podcast. We are just back from the square. We're actually on the colonnade watching the Urbi et Orbi blessing of Pope Leo XIV. What a rush this is. The first American Pope, Robert Prevost, who we've followed for some years at American Magazine. This is truly historic.
It feels like a dream. I mean, even seeing some of the newscasts that, first American-born Pope elected takes the name Leo XIV. It looked like a movie. I can't believe it. I never thought I would see an American Pope in my lifetime, certainly. And for us to have one, I mean, we were up there on the colonnade jumping up and down when we realized who it was. The crowd went nuts. And I think people are stunned.
It's incredible. We left the windows open so that we could still hear the chants of Leon, Leon
and
coming from the
people are still
square.
funneling by from the square.
But no, it truly was such a rush. It felt like television, but it was also, as a Catholic, it's been a while that we haven't had our father around. And so it feels good to have someone standing there and blessing us and the world.
And the whole thing was incredible for this other reason that we're standing on the colonnade. Where we're standing, we have a great view of the loggia where the new pope comes out and greets the people and blesses the people. But we don't have a view of the chimney that's attached to the Sistine Chapel. That's on the other side of the basilica. So we're standing there waiting, and we're sort of watching the crowd because the crowd is going to tell us if the smoke is coming out or not, and then if it's black or white.
In moments before, the crowd went nuts for a baby seagull.
Which I understand. It was very cute. But for us, I was like, we were like just getting over this like false excitement because we were like, oh my gosh, is it white smoke? Is it white smoke? And then we're like, oh no, just a bird. But then it was very shortly thereafter that they erupted again. And this time it was even louder. And then
it was like a minute later.
Yeah, it was.
And it was a different loud. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never heard a noise like that.
No, that was insane. And also so this was around 6:00. Where people saw the little seagull and started erupting. And my first thought was like, okay, when it was a false alarm, man, if that was true, that means we have white smoke on the first ballot of the afternoon on the second day, which is the fourth ballot overall, which is extraordinary because none of us were expecting that.
No.
Yeah.
Nobody knew who the candidates were really going in. It was seen as a wide open race. Everybody was talking about a slightly prolonged conclave. And here we are, fourth ballot, which is the same as what Pope Benedict XVI was elected on.
And the conventional wisdom is that if it was a very short conclave like that, it would be probably one of the two top contenders going into this, which was Cardinal Tagle and Parolin, and then it was neither of them.
We were basically on the colonnade while we were waiting to find out who the Pope was, deciding, or guessing between the amongst ourselves, is it Tagle, is it Parolin? I was not prepared for what happened.
You know what though? I was reading today, like as you get to more and more ballots, you're like, okay, it's coming. So I was looking at more bios of different guys, and I read Cardinal Prevost's. And one of the things that a lot of commentators were saying about him is even though he wasn't standing out the way Cardinal Tagle and Cardinal Parolin were as front runners, he checks a ton of boxes.
Yeah.
Like he has a really, really interesting and full ministerial career as a priest, and we're going to talk through it just a little bit so you get to know him a little bit more as a priest, then as a bishop, then working at the Vatican.
Do we want to just do bio right now, or
yeah?
All right, Ashley.
It's
put
funny.
some of this together.
I did, and I also was looking at his bio in the days leading up to the conclave, and I will say, reading that he grew up in Chicago hits different when he's actually the Pope.
Yeah.
We have our first American and our first Midwestern Pope, which must be very exciting for you.
I love Chicago. I love it so much.
You went to Loyola University, Chicago, so you lived there for many years.
I did. And it's a beautiful place. And to think that the Holy Father has eaten an Italian beef sandwich before I can't believe it,
I know, it's incredible. But yeah, some basic facts. He's 69, which is on the younger end of what I think we were expecting. That can be a pretty long papacy, and that was not something that we heard people wanted going into this. So there's that. Yes, raised in Chicago. He went to Villanova University, where we were just a couple weeks ago, which is hard to believe. And then after he graduated with degrees in math and philosophy, so sounds like a smart guy, he joined the Augustinians. So he did his theological education at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago.
Shout out to CTU.
Shout out to
Interesting.
CTU, which is a fantastic and historic higher ed, theological academy.
Yeah. He was ordained in 1982, and then he spent over a decade working in the missions in Peru. He became the Bishop of Chiclayo in 2015 and served in that role until 2023. And he's actually a naturalized citizen of Peru. So when people are very happy to say he's the first American pope, I think the people in Peru are also very happy that it's a pope with Peruvian citizenship.
Well, that just goes to one of the points that I was making earlier. That when you say a pope checks boxes, if this was a born and raised guy from Chicago who became the Bishop of Chicago and the Cardinal from Chicago, there's a good chance that he's not elected Leo the 14th. So that experience of the Global South, being a missionary and spending, he was there for 20 years, I think.
I was chatting with someone just the other day and who works at the Vatican, and they said they don't think of Robert Prevost as an American. He has sort of that broad appeal across North and South America.
The Italians here were saying he's the least American of the Americans.
Yeah, that's right. Which is, probably helped him, obviously helped him a ton in securing the votes needed to become elected.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so finally, he was called to Rome by Pope Francis in 2023 to be the prefect of the dicastery for bishops. This is a really important role. It's the person kind of suggesting names to Pope Francis from around the world to become bishops. And then he was created a cardinal in 2023.
Amazing.
So a very fascinating career.
And not cardinal for that long.
No.
Let's
So
get
And not in
rise.
not in the Vatican for that long.
Yeah.
No, let's get to his Urbi et Orbi blessing. So after we found out that we had a pope, the Habemus Papam, crowd went nuts for that. We found out that it was Cardinale Prevost, and that he had taken the name Leo XIV.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus Papam. Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV.
There's a bit of, I don't know, it felt like 10 minutes maybe before.
Felt longer than that.
Yeah, it did. Before he comes out and crowd cheers, goes nuts again. And he kind of just soaks it all in.
He looked very peaceful.
He did.
Yes.
He looked very peaceful.
Smile on his face.
Yeah.
He didn't look overwhelmed to me. I would have been overwhelmed. Seemed like he was ready for the moment. And the very first words out of his mouth were, peace be with you all.
And he talked about peace right away a lot. And there's this one line that really stood out to me in this first part. He said, this peace of the risen Christ is a disarmed and disarming peace, humble and persevering. So immediately you get the tone that this is a peaceful person showing great humility. He's kind of soft spoken, but he's gentle.
Yeah. I do not speak Italian, so I was only picking up bits and pieces of the blessing. But one word I heard and recognized, because it was a word Pope Francis often said, was tutti, everyone. And so now that I've seen an English translation of the blessing, that was also a component of really talking about everyone walking together hand in hand in this peace of Christ.
Yeah, really beautiful tribute to Pope Francis, because that, of course, is what Pope Francis was praying for in that same square just a few weeks ago, and the day before he died, praying for peace. And so, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but if you're looking for a sign of continuation for what Pope Francis was doing, I think he sent some pretty clear signals in this first blessing that he intends to continue down that path.
Yeah, I love the line. It was, "We still hear in our ears the faint but always courageous voice of Pope Francis blessing Rome."
Yeah, and to your point, Zach, you actually used the word synodal describing the church. So it's a little bit of insider baseball if you don't follow the church closely. But being a synodal church is really the initiative of Pope Francis. It's a really old initiative, has long history in the tradition. But Francis really resurrected it and tried to put it at the center of the church's kind of character. This way of like listening to each other, involving everybody in consultation and decision making, and being like one body walking the path together. And he just seemed to double down on that.
And it was a flashpoint in the debates leading up to this conclave.
I was going to say, we had a podcast talking about the conclave being a referendum on synodality.
And we heard that many of the cardinals in the pre-congregation meeting, this was something they were debating. There were people who were speaking there inside those meetings against synodality, and then there were a lot we heard from the Holy See Press Office speaking for it.
Donde un pueblo fiel ha acompañado a su obispo, ha compartido su fe y ha dado tanto para seguir siendo iglesia fiel de Jesucristo. A tutti voi, fratelli e sorelle di Roma, d'Italia, di tutto il mondo, vogliamo essere una chiesa sinodale, una chiesa che cammina, una chiesa che cerca sempre la pace, cerca sempre la carità, cerca sempre di essere vicino, specialmente a coloro che soffrono.
Yeah, for what here's what he said. This is a kind of working translation that we just made. To all of you, brothers and sisters in Rome, in Italy, throughout the world, we want to be a synodal church, a church that walks, a church that always seeks peace, that always seeks charity, and that always seeks to be close, especially to those who suffer. When I heard the word synodo, I looked right at Sebastian.
That was another one that stuck out to me.
Sebastian loves synodality, but I couldn't believe that he would say that in this first address.
So I remember, I did an interview with Scott Pelley from CBS when Francis came out on the balcony, in 2013. And if you remember, he was wearing just a simple cassock, so that was shocking to people. And one of the things that Scott Pelley said was like, "Oh my gosh, that's not right. He's not wearing the right clothes." As if the Pope could make a mistake about something like that. And then Scott said, "That's not a mistake. It's a message." So when I heard the word synodality in his talk, that's a message. That's a message to the cardinals who elected him, and it's a message to the entire church that this thing that Pope Francis started is going to continue.
Yeah. Just one other part I wanted to point out was he, about halfway through, he switched to Spanish,
yes.
Which I was excited to hear. I could understand that a bit better. And he gave a special message to the beloved diocese of Chiclayo in Peru that he served for a decade. And he said, where a faithful people has accompanied its bishop, shared its faith, and given so much to continue being a faithful church of Jesus Christ.
That was really beautiful. I was hoping a little bit there might be a little English in there for his people back in the Midwest, but I'm still, my heart is so full. I don't care.
I just want to pick up on that because this is the first time that the Catholic Church has a pope that speaks perfect English. And, during Francis's papacy, people who were Spanish speakers, especially if you were Argentinian and you could pick up the special dialect, because he was such a kind of colloquial speaker, you know what I mean? That he would use these words that a lot of only Argentinians could understand, or people, who spoke Spanish could understand. But we are now going to get we're going to have a new relationship with the Pope because he speaks English. He's going to be able to say things to us that connect with us in a way that has never happened before.
One more thing we should talk about. He's another religious order pope.
Right, Augustinian.
Which we were very fortunate to get to know the Augustinians some. We were just and at Villanova's campus doing an event with the Augustinians there a couple months ago. And funny enough, they have a big event, a big gala later this year that they invited us to, and they're
keynote.
they were giving an award to Cardinal Robert Prevost,
who no longer exists.
Yeah, who is now Pope Leo XIV.
That name's up for grabs.
So, Augustinians in Philadelphia, I'm sorry you got to find a new speaker for that event, I'm guessing, but I don't.
But shout out to them, and shout out to Father Robert Hagen, who we interviewed when we were there. He's the prior provincial of
the province of St. Thomas of Villanova.
You actually texted them, right? And
yeah, just congrats, and could we get a quote on what it's like to have an Augustinian pope? Because Pope Leo did say this in his Urbi et Orbi blessing. He said, "I'm a son of Augustine. I'm an Augustinian." Father Robert Hagen said, "We Augustinians are thrilled with the election of Pope Leo XIV. He is an Augustinian and an incredible ambassador of what our order is all about. St. Augustine was a doctor of grace, and Pope Leo XIV will be an instrument of God's grace for our church and all the people around the world. Together we offer our prayers for Pope Leo XIV as he begins his papacy as a shepherd for the flock. May God bless the Pope."
Love it.
Yep, that was Father Robert Hagen, OSA, Prior Provincial of the Augustinian province of St. Thomas, Villanova. So I imagine a lot of people are going to be looking up that order, what they stand for. And sort of
Great for Villanova's numbers. I wonder if this or winning the NCAA tournament does better for admissions.
But we should just pick up on this point. I mean, our colleague Ricardo da Silva wrote about this. We have a great article about it in the Pages of America. We'll post a link below. But the presence of religious order priests in the conclave was really significant. I think that we counted 4 guys who were the heads at one point of their respective orders. So you had the head of the Dominicans at one point, you had the head of the Salesians at one point, you had the head of and so Robert Prevost, who's now Pope Leo, was actually the head of the Augustinian order for a while. So he has this like global perspective, but he comes from like a specific charism that is not one that is typically that of a person that like kind of climbs ecclesially, right? Doesn't necessarily, very rare that you would become like a bishop, let alone a cardinal, let alone a pope. I mean, it just doesn't happen that often.
No.
Well, and that's another thing that kind of makes it easier for him to be an American. I think I want to go back to that because I don't think we really explained why it's so surprising that an American is Pope, which I can't believe I know.
It's unbelievable.
But the idea has been that because we are the world's superpower, we do not really want to give we don't want to have both the 2 most important people in the world coming from the United States. And a lot of people in the global South are not thrilled with the history and current intervention of the United States in their country. So it was surprising. And so, he has these things working for him. 1, long time in Latin America, and 2, being a religious order priest. One thing I did see on Twitter that was interesting is Leo XIII was the pope that kind of condemned Americanism.
I was just going to say that.
And now the first pope from America is Leo XIV. So we've come full circle.
The God continues to surprise us. And one of the biggest surprises I found out shortly after this was people were texting me that one of the last tweet, excluding retweets, that Cardinal Robert Prevost had was back in February. He tweeted out a column from our editor-in-chief, Father Sam Sawyer, a link to americamagazine.org.
Pope Leo, America Reader.
Pope Leo XIV reads America Magazine. So you should too.
Yeah.
Quick public service announcement.
And you might be Pope one day. But let's talk a little bit about Pope Leo, because this is, he's not a recent pope, relatively speaking. I mean, he died, I think, in 1903.
Yeah.
But he had like one of the longest pontificates, and at a very kind of tumultuous time, right? It was after the First Vatican Council. It was at a time when like the Industrial Revolution was hitting. It was a time when like the status of the church as something that had like temporal power and property and all that stuff was kind of being condensed. So the church was really, I think, like looking for, its new identity in a rapidly changing modern era. And one of the things that he like did was wrote some documents. One of them in particular, Rerum Novarum, which became kind of the first social encyclical of the Catholic Church. Like we think now of the last 100 and some years, of the church having a really robust social teaching, like something to say about what's happening in politics and society, the common good, the dignity of the person. But a lot of that comes from this like foundational document that he wrote on capital and later labor in the middle of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, and in the lead up to the conclave, we heard some reports about what they were saying in these meetings. And one thing that struck me is like they were really like outward looking, like what is happening in the world and what does the church need to do in response? And what's happening in the world because of artificial intelligence is probably the most important revolution since the Industrial Revolution, and is probably going to be way more revolutionary because it's not just, how we work, it's, who we are as humans. Like what is a human?
Yeah.
A lot of huge questions that are facing us, and for Pope Leo XIV to take that name, and the other thing Leo did was sort of he defined this part of the papacy that issued encyclicals and really sort of beefed up this like teaching office of the papacy. He staked that out. He also had like one of the longest papacies. I think he had the longest papacy before John Paul II.
Yeah.
It was said during his time that they joked that they not only had a Holy Father, but an eternal Father. So I hope that bodes well for Pope Leo XIV as well.
Well, I'm desperate to talk to Jerry about what he thinks about this, but we do have a few messages that he sent us in Slack with his first impressions, and one of them is that he was struck by the speed of the election, which we've talked about, just because it was such a huge and diverse group of cardinals. He also mentioned that both John Paul I and Benedict the 16th were elected on the fourth ballot, like Pope Leo XIV. But he also said this is a sign of great unity and witness of the church in a world that is so polarized and at war. He is a humble man, a man who is decisive and can govern, and is committed to building bridges and promoting peace in the world.
No, I honestly, thinking of the speed of the election, when we climbed those colonnades, I honestly didn't think we were going to see white smoke tonight.
No.
You do it because you do the job, right? And
there's always a chance.
Always.
There's always a chance.
But for all of these cardinals from all around the world, and the whole time we were hearing about how they don't know each other, they have to wear name tags.
Oh, and a lot of them said they think it's going to be a longer conclave.
Yeah.
Like they were on the record suggesting that because they weren't quite sure.
Even the ones that said it was going to be a short conclave said 2 or 3 days. And this was not 2 whole days even.
No, incredibly short. Incredible. We're sort of still processing this, so we appreciate your patience with us. But that's a little bit for you, the audience, on Pope Leo XIV, who was elected today on May 8th, 2025, on the 4th ballot here in Vatican City.
Viva il Papa.
Viva il Papa.